W. Howe of 515 Peach Street, Venice, Florida, 34292. John's phone number is area code 813-485-3842. The recording was made on November 23rd, 1988 at the Oldsmobile History Center at 4000 North Grand River in Lansing, Michigan. The recording was made by Jim Walkinshaw. This is tape number 1 of 2 tapes. Hey, John, we're on. I guess if you would just give us your name and address and phone number, please.
Well, I'm John W. Howe, living currently at 515 Peach Street, Venice, Florida. Zip code down there happens to be 34292. My phone number is area code 813, and phone number is 485-3842.
Right. Now, when did you start at Oldsmobile?
I started at Oldsmobile on the 26th day of December in 1933.
All right.
It's about 11:15 in the morning.
Oh my goodness. Where did you start?
I started in the axle plant. I had a little influence with Mr. Pete Hewitt, better known as Pete, some as Clarence, but he was the group leader in the axle plant at that time.
Okay.
I started out in the axle plant working on the yoke line, that being the startup of the knee action at Oldsmobile.
Okay.
34 models.
What did you do?
I ran drill presses. We had a big old milling machine. We used to mill the ends of the kingpin bosses on the knuckle support. I believe this was a combination line. I think of it. It was a double line. One half was the knuckle support. The other half was the yokes, they call it.
Mm-hmm. Well, now, was the yoke, was that the, like the knuckle? Or was
Right.
that
No, that's what the knuckle fitted on. In other words, this took the place of the old IB.
Okay.
The knuckle support.
Yeah.
In other words, there was a boss on that, the equivalent of previously what was on the end of the ivy.
Yeah. Okay.
The
Sure.
yokes there was top and bottom, which tied it to one, I think, to a stabilizer that was hooked to the upper frame, and the lower end was also tied to the frame with a spring between it, and that was the so-called independent or knee action suspension. That's
all right. Were those forgings or stampings, or what were
forgings?
Those were forgings.
Forge plant was making.
Okay, so how long did you spend there in the axle plant then?
I stayed in the axle plant. It's going to be hard to know for sure.
About.
I believe I stayed in the axle plant until wartime. I did.
Oh, all the way then through the
Right.
30s.
Matter of fact, I was in the axle plant when we went on war work. I went into the 20 millimeter machine gun plant.
Okay.
As a tool setup. Well, I went in there as a machine operator, about the second or third man in the old bolt department, the 20 millimeter machine gun department.
Where was that?
Building was adjacent to the axle plant. No. Yes, it was. Except I believe it was a building to the east. I can't right this moment recall the building number. The layout of the area at that time I would recall, but I don't know that that's that important.
Where was the axle plant when you were working in the axle plant?
It was in building. I believe it was building 38 at that time.
38.
38.
Okay. It wasn't out in 21.
No, no, it wasn't 21.
Okay.
21 was, okay, that's 21 is a whole Fisher body, right?
It was up by Fisher Body, yeah.
East of,
Yeah.
or west of,
Of the assembly plant.
right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no, it was, I believe it was building 38.
Okay.
It was the actual plant at that time.
So it was down by the engine plant.
And so I worked, on about, 3 months after the, I hired in, I believe it was much longer than that. They went to a third shift. And I went on as group leader when they started the third shift.
Okay. Still in the axle plant.
Still the actual plant.
Uh-huh. It's still in that general area
Still
with the.
going 38. So.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And then I was a group leader then until I went from there to the machine gun plant.
All right.
And
Let's stay with the axle plant for a minute, John. What other kinds of things went on down in the axle plant at that time?
we were making, as a matter of fact, we were at that time, the Pontiac was using the same front suspension that Oldsmobile was.
Okay.
So we were making Pontiac's parts as well as Oldsmobile parts.
All right.
And also in the axle plant, we were making, I wasn't connected with it, but we were making the housings for Pontiac, not the shafts, but we were making Olds and Pontiac housings. They were
The
identical.
rear axle housing.
Rear axle housing, they were identical.
Uh-huh.
And of course, Oldsmobile in those days was buying its differentials from Pontiac, and then we were making front suspension parts and the rear axle housing for Pontiac. It was kind of a trade-off deal for economy purposes.
Were we assembling then the rear axle in that area too, putting it all together?
They were assembling yes, they assembled the ours.
Uh-huh.
And we shipped just the housing to Pontiac.
Yeah. Okay.
And
that all was done in that same general kind of area that you were in?
I'm sure they're building 38.
All right.
See, I'm sure I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I was wrong once before in my life.
Right. Who were some of the people you worked with down there? Can you remember any names, individuals?
Yeah. Shortly, one of the reasons why I guess I went up to took on a group leader job. We were working foreman, what we were. And at that time, we was on the old bonus system.
Yeah.
And Pete Hewitt, who was the group leader on these for the front suspension parts on that line, they made him a night general foreman.
Okay.
Joe French was a day general foreman, and Ray Riley was a superintendent.
Okay.
Below the Woods.
He was a kind of a guy was Ray Riley.
If you ever read Out Our Way and days when they had a character in the Below the Woods, I'm sure the fellow's name was Aarons. Not really, but he had to have worked for Ray Riley's twin brother, because if there ever was a depiction of a character, why that sure was Ray.
What did Ray do? How did he manage folks then?
Well, of course, I was far enough away. I had very many contacts. We had a good foreman between he and us as kind of a protection, but he was just a gruff old guy who walked around there and looked like he was just ready to bite somebody's head off all the time.
How did that?
Of course, people that was closer to him than we were. Of course, I was just a young fellow just getting started in the world at the time anyhow. And it's 33, I just turned 23, so I wasn't as smart then as I became later. Up and down on that scale, I guess.
Now, then the foremen that you worked with, were they similar types of people, or were they a little less?
No, Pete Hewitt was a very nice fellow. Matter of fact, he was one of the first. I just came to Lansing in 1928. I was fresh out of high school, and I worked for Oscar Lenz in the motorcycle shop during the Depression.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, at least my room and board.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the Depression was ending and Olds went to the knee action where they was going to get a lot of additional help. Was all the front suspension parts that were being made in place of the I-beam. So it took a lot of help. And I was a new hire, because we didn't have seniority rules and regulations at that time. It was like we did later. But so I hired out, and there was a brand new hire and wound up on the seniority list, which they started not too long after that.
I see.
And with more seniority than guys who had been working there for years.
Oh, yeah.
Because they'd been off for several months. So they had lost their seniority date on the list because of depression. So now they're coming back in there, and here I'm on the list with more seniority than them, see.
And they didn't use the seniority list prior to that time?
They was calling the guys back to their old jobs.
Okay.
And these were brand new jobs.
Yes.
So they were mostly I'd say a good share of them were not all up by any stretch, but a pretty good share of them were brand new hires. And of course, jobs were premium, so you had to be a pretty good friend of somebody on the inside in those days too.
That was kind of how people got hired then?
That's right.
Through knowing somebody.
Right. Yeah, because, well, this is the end of the Depression, and you know, jobs couldn't even buy one for the duration there.
Now, you mentioned, John, the incentive system or the
Bonus system?
bonus system, yeah.
Yes.
How did that work?
It was a group bonus. In other words, if our department, they had a standard time, and we had to make X number of parts per day. The group didn't make any difference whether I did it all or you did it all, or we had the whole department did it all. Whatever would come off the end of the line at the end of the day, why that was the basis that the entire group was paid. So,
I see. Did you have a base rate too?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, matter of fact, I hired out at 52 cents an hour.
Oh my goodness.
And this was 26th of December. Then the next work day, I forget what day of the week it was, but the next work day after January 1st, where they dropped that hiring rate to 49 cents.
Oh my goodness.
So that 3 cents an hour was still a plum.
Yes.
So that was another break that I had.
So you got your bonus above that, so to speak.
If we made if we did got enough better, well, yeah, you had to produce a minimum amount, and then I believe that we got our base pay, and then if we produced more parts, then there was a bonus. Never was anything that as bonuses later became, but it was an incentive.
Okay.
The axle plant stayed at building 38 until they let's see, I think through the 36 model.
Okay.
And then that's when I believe they moved to building 21.
All right.
They made the last of the axle shafts with a taper on end that went in the keyway.
Yeah.
And there was going to the flanged rear axle shafts. So I remember those keyway shafts. It was a high service item. Of course, they made them on the production equipment. Yeah. I recall the figure that they made 100,000 axle shafts to put into service before they tore the line up. I believe they're getting ready to put the engine plant in there at that time.
So they pulled that out and headed it up for 21.
Right. Yeah, they started the flange axles over in building 21.
Now, did you move up there with those at that
Right.
time? Okay. So you moved up to 21.
Right. And as I recall, let's see, things were there was a slowdown in there, and after we got into 21, and then went back to one shift, and I was working on the. When we went to 21, I believe I moved over to the knuckle line, steering knuckles. And there was a slowdown along with the move and a recession in there, 38, I believe. And so they went back to one shift, and they didn't need a night general foreman. So he went back down to his old job as boss of the knuckle line.
Okay.
And Harry Greeno, he and I had been the group leaders on the knuckle line prior to this happening. Then we both went back to work.
So you got pushed off of being group leader.
Right.
Okay.
Now, wait a minute, Harry had was longer than I. Hewitt went back on as an assistant general. That's what he did. Hewitt and Ray Carter were shift general foreman. And Joe French was a day general foreman, and Ray Riley was the superintendent.
Okay.
Then when we went back down to one shift. This had to be a year or so after we moved over to 20. And so they did not need two assistant general foreman, and this is straightened out of that. Carter went back to work as a group leader over on the housing line. That's where he'd worked previously. Hewitt stayed on as the assistant general foreman. In other words, they had French was general foreman, of course, and so Harry Greeno took over then. He stayed on as the group leader for the steering line.
Okay.
Well, someplace along in there, that when they started picking up again, I went back and ran a grinder, grinding the bearings on the steering. I just can't remember now how long that happened.
Okay.
Well, then shortly after they start back up again, they put it had to be, I believe, after the sit-out strike.
Oh, okay.
I guess someplace in the union negotiations or something like that, they didn't have working foreman anymore. So we went on payroll at $200 a month.
Oh my goodness.
That was millionaires
in
those days. And
now, John, you were there during the sit-down strike then.
oh yes.
What happened?
For several weeks, we went out to the old driveway out east of town out there.
Oh, Howard Sober's place?
Howard Sober's place, I believe, and they moved our cafeteria tables out there. We went in there and sat down, and we made guesses of what we was going to be doing down the road.
Well, now, was that during that one, or was that the one after the war that you're thinking about there?
Now, this had to...
The sit-down strike in the 30s, when General Motors was recognizing the union.
I'd have to really give you gotta have a double recollection here.
Okay. Put them both on, and we'll try to sort them out later.
One of my recollections is that I think we are. There's two distinctly different times.
Okay.
The first time why we stayed out, the strike started, the sit-down strike initially started the day before Thanksgiving.
Okay.
And they shut the place down. But then a very short time why they allowed us to come back in the plant, but I think we must have been on salary for them to do that at that time.
Okay.
And I know just came in, did nothing all day.
Yeah.
And this went on for, I think the strike was around 120 working days.
Okay.
Duration. And there was all the supervisors and so forth. Why welding booths were real popular places.
Oh, yeah.
For art games, big money, pennies and so
Yeah,
forth,
yeah.
exchanging hand and with a couple of guards posted against plant protection and they come around. And this was really about all we did for the duration.
Oh, yeah.
And that and our paychecks,
Yeah.
which we were certainly thankful for. Well, I was at the time. And,
do you remember any difficulties with picketing and that kind of thing?
I think that back in those days, it had been up to the Oldsmobile personnel. I don't think there'd been a strike.
I see.
But there were such were things that they didn't have much to say about locally.
Yeah.
So because as far as I was concerned, relations were actions between management and union people. Of course, there's always a few grumblers.
Yeah.
I can remember one guy who was one of the workers. The day that I think we went out about 11 o'clock on Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and of course we came into work. I was foreman at the time. I had to be, and I said, "You guys are going to strike?" Yeah. I said, "God, what are you going to gain?" They made some pretty decent offers. Well, he said, "I don't know," but he said, "I can't make a living now." He said, "We might just as well do it, get started with it." He happened to be one of those guys that seldom ever worked every day in the week.
Oh, yeah.
He was probably averaged about 4.25 days a week.
Yeah.
And he wasn't making enough money to live on. So in his case, he got quite a raise if he just worked every day.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah. See, now take me back to the start of the war, John. Again, we'll start back. Now you kind of got through the moving the actual plant up to Building 21, and then at some point in time, then you came back to the gun production side of things.
Trying to think when did we? Do you have any idea when we started? If I get a date on it, it might help. When we started in the machine guns. Well, this had to be during World War II.
Yeah, it had to be 41, I suspect, either late 41, early 42, because I see stuff in some of our magazine articles that show pictures of those things.
Well, they put the we built 3 basic parts of the machine gun.
All right.
The tubes and the so-called tube extension which to assemble into, and the bolts.
Okay.
And the bolt was about 10 inches long, 2-3 inches wide. It was a sliding bolt to use it, and they called it the bolt. And it really was the breech that shoved the shell up in place when they fired. And then, of course, they were assembled and they were tested.
Okay.
And they had an underground firing range across the street from
that was
38.
Yeah, that was across the street from 36 or 38.
They took those things down there and fired. And of course, you couldn't hear them because it was down underground.
Yeah. And what were you doing then as part of all
I
that?
was a tool setup man.
Okay.
I was making the bolts.
All right.
On that entire program.
Did you get down in the firing range at all?
I was down there a couple of times to see what was going on, but things was pretty tough to get around any place. Matter of fact, there's people around that if you went to visit one of your buddies over some other part of the plant and you got caught, why you have to be getting to the 3rd degree. What the hell are you doing over here? See, you got no business. In other words, it was all semi-secret work. See,
it was
restricted. And
how did they know where you were?
Your badge had colors on it and so forth. forth.
Oh, okay.
And her picture was on it too. But I couldn't give you my badge and
Yeah,
let you get in because you wouldn't look like me.
yeah.
So all the badges, everybody's badge would have their picture on it.
Uh-huh.
I remember one day they obviously was one of the setup man. I think there was about 200 shipped in the boat department. Yeah. It wasn't in our area, but I heard about afterwards that somebody came in from central office, security, and they went in one of the departments and they got pull some fire hoses down and spread them around and just kind of made a general mess of things, see, and want somebody to stop. And I guess they did quite a little mischievous work like that before they got caught up with it. And boy, there were people's ears burning when that got through.
Oh.
The riot act had got read all the top on down about this thing, see, because after all, we were supposedly trying to get ready to defend ourselves from an enemy who meant business. And so we had to be meaning business too.
What else did we make, John, other than the 20 millimeter? Anything else that you're familiar with?
They made shells.
Okay.
Let's see, the 155 millimeter shell plant. Trying to get some dates on that. That had to be for the second war, didn't it? For the or did we make shells?
No,
big shells?
we made a lot of shells during World War II.
Yeah.
I think we made that shell during World War II.
Trying to think of how I got, because I went out of I went from the job I was on. I can't remember what job. One of the things we also made was the 37 millimeter.
Okay.
And on that they made tubes and tube extensions. Trying to think of where in the world we made them. I'm a little bit confused about the tie-in on those. That there was also being made back in that place a 75 millimeter that they mounted on a plane.
Okay.
Fired it between the rotating.
Like
problem was it was timed to the engine, and as the blade
propeller went around.
As the propeller went around, why then it shot through the space between the propellers. Okay. So you can imagine what happened to the time missed on that. But I never heard of any of it ever happening. But I'm sure that someplace down through the years, why that did happen. But they mounted this doggone 75 millimeter on the belly of these planes and fired it out between the blades of the prop.
Oh yeah,
as it was rotating. And they made 75 millimeter big cannons, long jobbies.
Okay.
Those tubes must have been 12, 15 feet more in length.
Big fellas.
Big fellas. They also made some 105 millimeter someplace. Yeah, this could have been Korean War. We made jet engine parts for the Korean situation.
And some big, I think, 105 millimeter cannon that we made down in 37. I remember those. Building 37. Did you get out in the shell plant at all, John? Where they made the shells?
Well, when we was making the 105 or 155 millimeter shell.
Okay.
I went. There's a basically, and I think what happened, I went out on the road is for about 5 months as an expediter,
Oh, okay.
going into machine tool plants. And this is when, this was when they're setting up to build the Continental engine for, I guess it was, or Packard, who was it?
For the war again.
Right.
Yeah. They were Pratt and Whitney. Engine parts. Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah.
Of? Okay, there was a kind of a crankshaft like thing and a rod, a big rod that we were making, a connecting rod.
I'm trying to think.
Okay, we're back on again.
Well, the Oldsmobile was, in this case, was a first in, like they were in many things down through the years. They getting machinery in for this job, and they needed expediters out in these plants to keep them. So what they did there, they went out into the shop and picked out some fellows who knew machinery.
Okay.
And they sent them out as expediters. And in most cases, while they were using salesmen and so forth, and they go into a plant and they tell them anything, and they didn't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Matter of fact, many of your salesmen never would know it and have no interest in machining operation.
Right.
So they always picked out fellows who had machine experience and sent them out on the road as expediter. And I was lucky enough to be one of those.
Okay.
And it was about 5 months of that. Well, I think when I came in off of that is when I went to, they were having their problems with the 155 millimeter shell and the processing of it. And what had happened, there again, they was using some good sound principles. They sent the processing group out to a plant where they were making this shell, and they was making about 35,000 a month. And so it was an excellent operation. So these boys decided, well, okay, I think we needed. It's just, we were supposed to be building 1,000 a day.
Mm.
No, I can't. Maybe this figure will come to it. Anyhow, they decided, well, that's an excellent process. So we need about 3 times as many shells as they did.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, well, we'll just set up 3 lines, the equivalent of 3 lines there, and make something back and forth. Well, that worked better in theory than it did in practice. So they were having just more problems than they knew what to do with in trying to get under production. In fact, they started out, they started to understand if they had a fixed fee on
Mm-hmm.
these shells, and they were up to production, but the cost was killing them. The figure that I heard was that they were shipping. They shipped them 1,000 in a car. I guess they were supposed to be running about 300,000 a month, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So the story that I got was that they were shipping 3 carloads for about 3 days, and the next day they shipped 4, and it was costing Oldsmobile $25 over and above what they're collecting for every shell that they shipped.
Mm-hmm.
So every time a car went out there, they was $1,000 in the red, $25 a shell. So they got some production people again into help with this job, and I was one that was picked to go in on that enterprise, and from my expediting job, as a matter of fact. We eventually got the place where they was making money.
What kinds of things did you have to do? Do you remember any kinds of things that you had to chase down?
Uh, as an engineer, I don't remember too much of the actual detail. At this moment, or maybe eventually it would come to it, but it's so doggone far back, and so much water over the dam since. I'm not at this moment. It's not specific. I think it was a lot of cases just a case of standing on one foot then the other, and studying the job and deciding what was causing their problems. And of course, there was. I remember one of the things that they that we did. They was a bit of a turnover in the production engineers. They did the job. I don't recall the names of some of those that I had it made, but I know that we were making these shells over in by Logan Street in one of the buildings over there. That's where they was doing the machining. Of course, that was sporting, and they were being heat treated and then being machined in this assembly building. And it was, I think, the second one up from the tracks.
Building
To the
75, probably.
Yeah, building 75. Okay, and they we was having trouble with some of the operations. So one of the fellows had an idea. They was had designed people working on this thing, and so somebody just prior to my, I wrote an order to have a set of tooling designed and made to put on this operation. I believe it was where they was cutting the seats of the rotating band to be later shrunk onto. And so somebody told me, of course, I was just getting my feet wet in the job, and they said somebody had a wild hair. I think let's do this and see if that won't work. See? So write an order to get the design to design it. So we got the order. I wrote the order, took it over into the tool design department. Got one of the tool designers who had been around for a while. He got the job, and so I was over, explained to him what we was going to do and so forth. He said, "Hey," he said, "they got storage over in building 75 upstairs." He said, "They got a set of tooling just like this over there that they built before. It didn't work, and so it's been replaced and put upstairs." So I said, "I got to see it." So he took me over there, and sure enough, here was the thing all designed and built. And of course, this is one of the things that you'll get when you don't do one of the things. One of the things that I learned, one of the things my education was high school, and one of the things that I recall that I've lived with all my life was that was the old boy that gave the commencement address. So he answered the question of when. She's asked, when could you consider yourself educated? Boy, oh boy, that's quite a question. The best answer that I've ever heard on that was, it's when you've learned to profit by the past experiences of others. Well, I live with that to this day. And so we took those tool blocks at that time, and we made some modifications in them. It was quite evident what had happened previously, and I don't remember now whether we actually put them back on the job or not, but I think that we did make some modifications on them, and I'm not so sure what we made modifications on and put them back on and were able to use them. And I think they did do the job. I believe that's my record. Now, that just confirmed me that much more. And as long as I was around Oldsmobile, if we was having a problem, which that was always was part of my work there, was helping to solve their problems, was to listen to anything that anybody preferably the chip owner. You go out, you had a job that causing you problems. You go out and stand around on one foot then the other and look at that thing, and the first thing you know, one of these guys is sidling up to you because, after all, here you are out there with a clean shirt on and a tie and so forth, and you have to be somebody as far as he's concerned. And so then he's up and telling you what's wrong with the thing. Well, there's been a good many times, but his conversation might just touch the right key that started the ball rolling, which eventually rolled around the town 4 or 5 weeks and came up with the answer. But that's a philosophy that I've had always, from that day to this. And I've had many experiences down through the years where I've taken out, okay, that didn't work, and well, okay, what did you do? And we move on from there.
And then, did you stay out there for quite a period of time then, John, on the Shell thing, or?
Yeah, I was connected with the Shells until they closed it up, as I remember it. And I believe from the Shells, I think we went back to building automobiles again. And that's when I went into the production engineering department. Marv Katke was the guy that pulled me out of the machining operation and gave me an offer to go on to go into the production engineering department.
Okay. Who, back to the Shell thing just for a moment. Do you remember who were some of the people out in the plant at that time? Like, who was the superintendent and any of those kind
John Dykstra was our manufacturing manager in those days.
All right.
And if you ever knew John or not.
No.
He was a pretty sharp tongue, but he was likewise was pretty sharp too.
Mm-hmm.
He was a good machine man. And he eventually wound up, I guess, he and Mr. Skinner never got along too well.
Mm.
So I think somebody from Ford offered John a job, so he left Oldsmobile and went out to some big outfit that was making bathtubs out in California someplace, and was out there for about a year, and then I don't think Ford wanted him to come direct. So then he moved from there back into Ford, and just, it's history of what happened there.
Yeah. Why didn't he and Skinner get along?
I don't know, just personalities or whatever. Skinner had, what the traditional memory of an elephant is. Well, Skinner, an elephant couldn't hold a candle to Skinner. I remember one time, here he's plant manager, vice president, et cetera, and he was out and they had a job that was straightening control arms. Control arms,
sure.
part that your steering tie rod, cross rod fits, ties to the knuckles, so well. They would put those in a press and were straightening them. And so it really wasn't hard. It looked like it. The guy that did the thing, he was quite crude, but they put him in a really big old heavy clamp, and the guy had a piece of pipe about 1.25 inches diameter and about 4 feet long with a crowbar stuck into the end of that yet. It was a good looking bar. The guy checked one of these, stick it in there, and he'd rear down on this bar and bend it one way or the other, see? Well, it looked like a man killer to Skinner, so he was out through there, and in fact, I think our Katke was I believe was a process man on the job at the time. But anyhow, Skinner took a look at that thing and he said, that looks like it's pretty crude to me, fix it. Well, he was visiting out that way again in another 3 or 4 weeks, and here's there had been some work done on it, but number one, we kind of figured that we had other jobs that was more tougher than causing us more of a problem than that was. And after all, the guy that was doing the job, he was a bit husky, but muscular, but he wouldn't complain about it being too hard, see. And Mr. Skinner's out there again in about a month or such a matter. After that, he goes down there, comes and stops as he stops and looks at that thing. He said, I thought I said to fix that. He walked on. Well, it wasn't more than 30 seconds before there was people working on that thing to fix it. I'll tell you.
Got the message.
They really got the message.
Did Skinner spend a lot of time then in the plant?
Not overall, although he did make many tours. He did get into the plant quite frequently. I guess overall, perhaps he spent more time in other parts of it than he did in ours. Back pretty much the beginning end, I would say. And of course, they're more interested in automobiles than they are in just parts that make them.
See, before Skinner was there was a guy by the name of McEwen.
Okay, I couldn't remember who was that.
Did you ever get any chance to deal with him or see him at all?
While McEwen was there, I was just a production worker.
Okay.
I guess I was a group leader under McEwen, and used to go to some deals, but I was just one in a crowd of many faces as far as he was concerned. But then Skinner, I never had too many direct contacts with him. But then from Skinner, we went to can't think of it was a short time general manager in there between him and
Wolfram.
Wolfram.
Okay.
I think Wolfram was on as a plant manager the longest of anybody ever in General Motors, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he was there for quite a while, John, now, so you went to working in production engineering then after the war. And
Actually, I went into production engineering. As far as old cars, yes. But I went in there on the 155 shell job.
Okay. Then after the war, what kinds of things, or where did you end up working then?
I stayed in the axle plant.
Okay.
And from that, I went in there as the production engineer.
Right.
I was the engineer for the front engine parts, and Mitchell was the production engineer.
Pete Mitchell
for rear parts, axles, housings. He had the Pontiac and Olds housings and Pontiac and Olds. Let's see, I guess we didn't make we did, and some, and then we quit, I guess, making Pontiac shafts. And of course, it was the rear assembly, he had that too.
Okay.
The front assembly was under me, although there wasn't much of that. We had a couple of foremen down there a long time. We only ran this back in those days, the actual assembly much of the time, initially at least, on one shift. Ran two shifts machining the parts, but they could put them together in one shift.
And did you assemble the knuckle and the knuckle support and that kind of thing? Or?
Yeah, they went, they put the brake drum and the whole kit and caboodle.
Okay.
So they started out with had a chain, and they just grip a knuckle support and the jaws on either side, and they wound up, and they put the whole kit and caboodle on there.
Okay. You didn't put the control arms on, though, did you? The upper and lower control arms, or did you assemble those, or were those put out in the car assembly plant?
No, they were put on too.
You did that too?
Yeah.
Okay. So you shipped a kind of a three-legged thing over to the car assembly plant?
Right. Of course, at that time, it was over building 21. Right?
Yeah.
We just run around the end of the line and just 40, 50 feet over here where they was being assembled onto the frame, see.
Because the car assembly plant was running down Building 16 in those days.
Right.
Yeah.
It started in, headed north, and swung around in the open area, and then headed south, and just ahead of the body drop. The body drop, matter of fact, was right to the north there, at the corner of, so I guess that's 21, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, there was more of it over on the side there, and I'm not sure about all those building numbers, but
kind of a mixed up mess down there.
Yeah. But the bodies came in, they were hauled from across town, and so they was in storage upstairs and no deponent there.
Okay. Then how long did you stay working then in the axle plant as the who was the production engineering boss at that time?
Well, I stayed in as production engineering boss.
Yeah.
Mitchell and I was working for Athey.
Athey.
Brian Athey. He'd
All
been
right.
tool design supervisor at one time, and then he
All right.
moved up. And he had charge of the axle engineering,
Mm-hmm.
production engineering. And I forget who was, Katke who had the engine plant. And then when he left, I was trying to think of who did. Bill Petzinger,
Okay.
I believe, took over as on the engine parts,
All right.
engines. And I stayed in production engineering from the 155 shell job clear on through, and then when they started start tooling up for the jet engines,
All right.
I moved from axles to the jet engines.
Okay.
Mitchell, he was appointed as general production engineer, supervisor of that. And I went along kind of as Pete's assistant. Matter of fact, the way the organization chart showed Pete and his secretary, and then right below was me.
Uh-huh.
Under me was my engineers and the tool design department.
Okay.
Now, the difference between Pete's crew and my crew was that I had him and a girl over me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I stayed there.
You know, what did you guys have to do with the jet engine? Now, what kinds of things did you do there?
We were the manufacturing engineering part of
Okay.
all the machining in that.
Okay.
We did all of it. In fact, I was the first approval on that. I always felt kind of good about this, the way it turned out and so forth. But I was the first approval on over $200 million worth of machines and tools on that job, or government orders.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Who designed that thing?
it was a Armstrong Siddeley in England designed the engine.
Oh, did they?
Pratt and Whitney was licensed by the government by Armstrong Siddeley to build them in America. And then General Motors had a contract to build a complete Sapphire engine, the J65, and the plane. And Buick had the prime contract to build the engines for the Air Force, and with Pratt and Whitney controlling the design of it. Okay. And there was a lot of pleasant experiences with that, and amusing things happened. I can remember one time we was down a bunch. I was Army Agent Jerry. Pete Estes was in the group, and then we were down arguing with the Pratt and Whitney engineers about some tolerances, and they had some tolerances on some of the parts there that was one that was plus 10 or plus 15, minus 14, and so we looked at the thing and said, "Well, why be so stupid on this thing? And how did you just make it plus or minus 15,000 if that's what you want?" And all they hemmed and hawed, and finally they said, "Well," he said, "if they put those kind of dimensions we was asking for out in their plant, well, then their guys, when they get that kind of house, they just ignore them." Our answer to them was, and I said, "Look," I said, "that's the way Oldsmobile works." I said, "If you put plus or minus 15,000 on there, we've got a yardstick out there that we've got down at the hardware store to measure the dimension with. But if you put plus or minus 2,000 on there, and then we've got some pretty goddamn sophisticated checking equipment. If you put down on there a couple of tenths, we've got several $1,000s worth of equipment there to check that. In other words, to us, the tolerances,
Right.
the amount of tolerance determines perhaps the accuracy of the equipment that you would use." And before we got through, I don't think that they used the same prints in their plant that we used, but they yielded and started giving us tolerance we asked for.
Uh-huh.
But this was amusing as a devil at the time. The guy, it was, you could see that something was happening there, not quite what, but they just wasn't going to give in, see, and they finally did tell us why, that, they say you had certain kind of tolerances, well then, okay, the guys would just ignore them completely.
Isn't that interesting? How long did that all take, John, all of that?
I started, in fact, Gatke was our initial boss on the jet engines, if I remember right. And we started in on that thing, doing some preliminary engineering, manufacturing engineering on that thing in 1950, I believe. We started 3 or 4 numbers. I think they had the word that that Buick was going to get the contract, and then we was going to get the contract for. We made all the rotating.
Okay. And they took that and assembled it in the end.
And they made the stationary parts. It was housing around the house. They don't think Buick made very little stuff themselves, but other divisions they made the other parts. But we made either made them or furnished all of the rotating parts. I went back into automotive just before they put the lock on the doors
Before
of
they
jet
shut,
engine parts.
before they shut the plant down?
Before they shut them, not many weeks. There was, I think, well, there was 2 or 3 fellows helped in getting the stuff cataloged and so forth, and furnished the information for people to catalog it as it was being shipped out.
John, you had mentioned a pilot line that was made for the jet engine.
Yeah,
what was that? Where was that?
Well, we had the capability over there. It took us a long time to do it, but we could build a jet engine in there. And we got parts of the machines. Of course, they was this time finishing up. I think the Saginaw Street plant was already on the books to be an actual plant. Okay. Or at least this thing came along. They just told the government we've got the building designed. And so they finished the building, and then as the machinery started coming in, then it started being set up over there. Okay. And in the meantime, while we was putting enough in, that I think that we made and assembled one assembly at the in the pilot line there. And the pilot plant, where was that? It was in 37. All right. Which was kind of new also at that time. Right. Yeah, that was. It was being used, part of it, most of the building was being used for building cannons. Okay. Yes, the big cannon. Right. Yeah. Because I can remember, of course, I walked right by them, and I was concerned about the little old jet engine parts, but I have a faint recollection of this department being right in the same open area building. Okay. And then you actually had at least kind of one of everything machinery-wise set up there so you could do the machining and did you actually assemble then the rotating, the assemble part of the thing? They made one assembly there. And that was it was a first on that. We had a lot of firsts on that. This jet engine program, it was typical Oldsmobile enterprise as far as I'm concerned. But there was 99.9% of the guys had never even hardly heard of such a thing as a jet engine before we had a contract and was telling the world that we was going to build them and we was going to build them better than anybody else, which we did. Sure. And the matter of fact, eventually we got into production. I'll get back to this assembly pretty soon. But anyhow, we got into production, and of course our parts was interchangeable. And years later, down a year or two later, happened to be down to the right plant one day. I probably was talking to the engineers down there, and of course these engines had to put out I don't know 82 or 83 100 pounds of thrust.
Okay.
And that in order to, before the Air Force would buy them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the engineers at Pratt went down there said that frequently they'd have an engine that wouldn't meet the specs with the rotating parts that they had built.
Yeah.
They'd pull them out and put our parts in the damn thing and sell the engine. Get another 200 to 300 on the average. On the engines that we built would put out 200 to 300 pounds more thrust. Now that don't sound like much when you're talking about 8,500, but by the same token, or 8,200, but by the same token, you know the type of design it is.
Sure.
It had to be straining itself to ever do anything, see?
Yeah.
And that always made me feel real good. But there's a lot of the design. In other words, I remember a trip. The first time I saw any jet engine blades outside of just one laying on my desk that somebody brought back from someplace was one of my engineers and myself. We made a trip up to 80 Row, who were making jet engines up in Canada. Or Mitchell and Hager, Frank Hager, Sr., had been up there, and then we went up there and just looked at the process over, talked to these people and so forth. We came back from there, and there's a lot of parts of our processing that I just told them in plain English. I just don't see how that you can ever expect to hold the tolerances that they expect to be held on this thing, doing it the way they're doing it. And we came up with such things as putting a manufacturing end on all the blades. Every blade we built had material that we cut off and threw away, but it was on there so we could hold it for the manufacturing. The blades all had a center boss on the outer end, which eventually was cut.
W. Howe, made on November 23rd, 1988. This is tape number 2 of 2 tapes. Okay, there, back up.
To me, I have formulated an opinion that after all, reciprocating engine, where you can, with pistons and so forth, where you've got control of it, but when you're depending entirely on moving this air through there to get your thrust out of it, right? To me, I thought, well, uniformity is going to be the secret of this thing working. And our whole process, as far as these blade designs and all the rest of the stuff of manufacturing, I need to say, was in order to maintain uniformity. And just as sure as I'm sitting here, that is the reason that our engine did outperform those that Wright was building. Because I can remember one day we had a salesman in trying to sell, say, a process on the compressor blades were all riveted at the base. And there was anywhere from, I think, 38 to 90 of them, depending on their size. As bigger, the more there was, the shorter they were, and so forth. In other words, you had a bullet-shaped center hub when it was assembled, with blades 6 inches or more long, getting down to something under 3 inches. And turbulences in there, to me, would certainly develop if you was trying to get this. After all, you had wind speeds in that thing of well over 100 miles an hour, say. And it started out, that was being added to it, as I understand it. But anyhow, they our engines always would outproduce their engines. And there was such things as this thing I started telling them to go about they had built the drilling equipment, which I had looked at down at Pratt & Whitney for anchoring these blades in there. And I just couldn't see how that you could maintain on a production basis the uniformity that you ought to have. Maybe you could meet requirements, but I never did like to do any job. I always wanted to do it the best that I could see to do it, rather than just something to get by with. And so this fellow was trying to, we'd been talking to one of our machine tool builders about this job, and the engineer, he was an engineer, but was also their salesman. We'd cooked up a deal. So this guy was in trying to sell us some equipment. So, okay, we was obligated to look at it. After all, let's see what he was doing. And also, I just could see what was wrong. And he kept telling me how you going to do this. And I'd ask him, well, what would you do in case of this? Well, he didn't know, but then he kept on for about an hour. And finally, I keep asking questions. And well, okay, those things can be ironed out, see? I said, I know things can be ironed out, but I said, I've yet to buy a piece of equipment that I couldn't see where I could go if I was having a problem and fix it. And I said, these things I've been asking you, I just don't know how you would fix them if you got into a problem. And I said, I've got the first machine to buy that I don't know. I always try to analyze foresee what the problems may be, but if I can't foresee a fix for them before I start, I'm not about to buy it. And eventually we did the Cross Machine Company in Detroit, and the salesman, Chet Johns, came into our plant, and I got quite a kick out of this deal in retrospect, looking back at it. Matter of fact, he had his 50th wedding anniversary, and I got a letter from his family, because I corresponded with it. They wanted, well, something maybe from my experiences, see. So I put a little story together on this thing, and what really happened was he was figured he and I together had figured out a process of how we were going to do this thing. And in fact, we was going to assemble these blades discs together, where you had to drill the rivet holes. Mm-hmm. So it was crude, but it was good too. And we actually used shim stock, shim the base of these blades. We had in case of 90 blades, there was 90 centers around the outside of this thing that we engaged in it. So we held that blade exactly on the same center lines that it was machined on, see? And to me, that is the item that really kept put the lid on the fact that this engine did do its performance, see? It beat because we did have those blades exactly spaced all the way around here. And but anyhow, the amusing part of that was that I was single at the time, and I was living out east of town at a motel. And he came into town on a Friday morning as a routine visit, just to see how things was going. Mm-hmm. Well, while he was in the plant Friday morning, I believe it was Friday morning, they got it could have been Thursday. I think maybe it was Thursday. But anyhow, we got the word to go. The money had been released, and we could start placing orders. Mm-hmm. So he sat at the desk talking to me. He was talking about the job and kind of gassed just a little bit too, because I didn't know that this thing was ready to break either, see? And got the word. Says, "Oh, Chet, we got to go to work. They told us to buy this machinery." So he came in the morning, and just to make a social call, well, there was a lot to wrap up. After all, there was a lot of machines. Yeah. Matter of fact, our initial order on this thing was substantial. And so we weren't getting through that day, getting the orders for him to take back with him, because we were ready to go. So he decided, well, he had to stay over. Well, this being wartime, my hotel rooms, sleeping accommodation was tough. Mm-hmm. I said, well, if you want to, Chet, I said, you can stay with me tonight. I got a double bed out the motel out there. Well, okay. So he goes downtown and buys himself some clothes. But I kiddingly told him, I told the story afterwards, when he finally, he stayed with me that night. And so the next day, late in the afternoon, he heads back to Detroit with an order from well over $1 million worth of machines and tools. See, not an order, orders.
Yeah.
Because that you had to almost every nothing covered work you had to buy an order, had to have an order for. See, and so I kid him. He said, "Well, of course he was quite elated." And later find out that what was the largest order that they had ever had in one order, one job.
Isn't that interesting?
And so I said, "Well, okay, Chet, that's what you get when you go out and you sleep with a customer." So we had, over the years, we had a lot of fun over that. But it was, I feel it was one of the keys to that engine that we built being as good as it was this uniformity of spacing and so forth on there.
Did Cross provide most of the machinery for that?
They provide all the machines and tools for the drilling.
All for the drilling.
Drilling of the rivet holes.
Okay.
And was 90 blades on 6 of these stages.
Yeah.
And 2 rivets in each one, so it took a lot of spindles.
You bet.
And then, of course, these doggone fixtures, right? That I remember now how much money they were, but you had to have those guys to put them in there because it was a best job to assemble these blades in there and lock them into position. Then you just set this whole blade and disc assembly into the machine, and then you had spindles coming in and drilling and reaming the holes. So you made more than one pass in the holes, because they had, I think we made either 2 or 3 passes in the holes because tolerances had to be real close. And in assembly there, they riveted the blades in place.
How about the blades themselves, John? Did you have a lot of machining to do on those?
Yes, there was lots of machines.
Were the surfaces machined?
Yes.
Airfoil surfaces?
Yes. We ground all those except the aluminum blades, and they were Ford finished. But we ground the turbine. Those were high nickel.
Steel.
Yeah.
Or steel.
Nymotic 90, I remember, were 90% nickel. That's what they were. And but the other blades, and once we got them drilled and reamed, in other words, they were married to a position. They were numbered 1 to 90.
Oh yeah.
And there was numbering on the discs, index points on those, so that once that blade had been put in this fixture and drilled in place, see, we drilled the disc and the blades at the same time.
Yeah.
So we had to have. That was one of the things that they weren't doing in this other process. That this guy said, "Well, you just can't." And for a rivet on the kind of pressures that on, you ought to have perfect alignment. And there's only one way in the world to do that, and that's to drill the doggone blades into discs.
Yeah, together.
As an assembly.
Yeah. How did you achieve the balance on the thing?
We once we got the blades riveted in place, and we had some band saws which were furnished by Dual, I believe in Minneapolis. We stuck them in there, and we just rotated the blade and just sawed the ends off of these blades in a circle. Then we put them in big grinders and ground the OD.
Well, okay.
And so now we've got it. As I remember, I think machining, I think our machining was close enough that balance was not a problem, because all the surfaces in those assemblies were machined. See, the blade was machined on every surface that wound up after it was assembled on the disc. But then you ground the underneath the so-called shoulder of the blades where it fit on a shroud. That was ground. The edges were ground. The mating surfaces were ground. The OD was ground. So it was all machined. And I don't think that it's I have no recollection of there being any balance problem with the engine or any provisions for balancing it.
Now, did you test each of the rotating members
Yes, they were spun in a vacuum.
in a vacuum?
Yeah. Now, Bill Gates was the engineer on the assembly.
How did they do that?
They used steam turbines. They had a pit. They dropped them down in because after all, they had to turn those things up to here you got an assembly that weighs several hundred pounds, see?
Yeah.
And it would take to spin that thing, even though it was open, it would take several hundred horsepower to spin that up to
Sure.
the 8,500 or I forget what the RPM was at that thing, but it really rolled up
Yeah.
there. And it took a lot of horsepower. Well, the way they did that, they put these down in a chamber and put a vacuum on the thing, and then they used about I forget what, 50 horsepower steam turbine or something like that.
With a shaft connection of some
Right,
kind?
come on through it. And I know when they first started that, they was having, I think the first or second one that they tried to run, atmospheric pressures were such that they had a heck of a time getting the vacuum so that so they could bring it up to speed.
Oh, yeah. You had to evacuate it to get it to speed.
Right. Yeah, otherwise it would have taken an aircraft engine almost to spun the thing into those speeds, see, but in the vacuum.
Mm-hmm.
They had to get it down to about a zero.
Yeah. Did you ever get one that exploded?
No, never did.
Mm-hmm.
Well, on this assembly, there was an assembly. This was one of Bill Ray Gates's ideas of how to do this, because we watched him assembling those things down at Wright. It was about the steel. The coefficient of expansion is different. It's quite a lot different.
Mm-hmm.
I think I still could quote you the coefficient of expansion between the
Nobody
aluminum and the
knows.
steel. But, they would, the center shaft was on, and it had ears on it for mesh,
Mm-hmm.
so you held the assembly into perfect alignment once it was assembled. And there was about a 15 thousandths press fit on it.
Mm.
So, see the boys down at Wright putting those together, and of course what they would do, they would cool the shaft down, shrink it, and then warm up the laden discs, and then the guy, they'd set this on, and they'd try to real quick assemble the laden disc on there.
Right.
And then there was sledgehammers were driving them down in place and so forth. Well, that'd give you a heart attack to watch them. So Bill decided there was a better way to do it. So what he came up with was a large press. And in this press, what we would do, we had an undersized shaft. And you would make the assembly on this undersized shaft.
Flip all of the discs onto
The
that.
whole, there was 13 stages
Mm-hmm.
in the compressor, see? And between each stage, there was a shroud. I always call them glorified barrel hoops.
Mm-hmm.
And so then you'd assemble that, you'd put it in this press, and then you'd grab it in the middle and just pull it back with pressure on these, and back into the hood of the machine. And you had heating elements in there to warm up the whole assembly.
Mm-hmm.
I think likewise, as a helper, I think he put a heating element in the core of it, and he had a dry ice freeze tub over here with the shaft in it.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to soak in there for a period of time. So that was, our volume was never, but that was no problem. So they put the shaft in and freeze it. And then once it got ready to go, I was the first one that they put together. A lot of people standing around there with their fingers crossed, because he was going to do an awful lot of crunching if it didn't work. See? So they finally get out and they haul this shaft up out of there with us for steam and frying us off of it in the atmosphere. Man, how much vodka was around it. Stick that in there, close her in, and press the button, and in come these heads with all these blade disc assemblies, and all that thing went together like it'd been doing it for 40 years.
All right.
You never saw such
All in one shot.
jubilation as there was over that deal. It really worked. Of course, as far as I know, Wright never did go to that method. They continued to use the old sledgehammer. But it took us about a couple of men to put one together, and most of standing around waiting for things to happen. But I think they could put one together in a half hour, something like that.
But that was your assembly machine.
Right. Yeah, that was an Oldsmobile first in the industry. And there was a lot of it that thing.
Well, that's interesting, John. Interesting.
The turbine. They were at the bottom end fir trees. Remember the fir tree farm, I'm sure, on this base of those.
Yeah.
Now there's two ways to make those. One of them was that they would broach the slots in the wheel. Well, that had you couldn't get in there with the grinding. There's hardly any grinding.
Yeah.
Those that had to be
Yeah.
a broach. And then on the blades, there was two methods of making those. You could broach that, or you could grind the blade. There was the blade was the male part of there. In this case, I can remember which the broaching was lots faster than grinding. But there again was the deal I saw Frank Hager. He was our chief production engineer on the job. He was a top dog. And I remember convincing him to look at the broach industry. After all, they're all people making things that they haven't done before, training people and so forth. I said, if they can make us enough broaches to broach the discs, wheels, they've done their effort. And we should grind the blades. Well, that was a decision that I finally was able to convince him of that. And it wasn't hard to convince, but the big thing was provide people with information so that when the boss comes around, the top boss says, "Why did you do this?" Well, then he needed to have an answer too. See, but we bought grinders from Excel.
Oh, okay.
We ground those. We had excellent results on that. There again, we had quality that far excelled what Pratt and Whitney, who were aircraft engine builders from way back. I would kind of like that. Matter of fact, at one point in this manufacturer, Pratt and Whitney was had a shuttle service between Oldsmobile and Hartford, bringing their production people and their design people down there, looking at how we were doing things, because we were just beating their socks off on cost and on quality.
Interesting.
I heard by the grapevine that the Air Force had told them, look, they were dragging their feet. You get down and see how Oldsmobile is doing this job, or we're going to turn the key in the doggone door of your plant. I heard that. Pretty direct statement saying. So, which is another thing that made me feel good, but I made some contributions to some of these important decisions, things that I think were the key. Fortunately, we were able to see them. We didn't have any predetermined ways of how to do anything.
Never done it
before. Like I said, I think by the time Oldsmobile got the contract, as far as the manufacturing people was concerned, as the people that's actually going to do the work, I don't know, because I have a dozen in the whole plant that never even saw any of this stuff.
Who was the superintendent out in the plant that had to run the plant?
Alan McRae.
Okay.
He was had quite a bark. And he was fair. He and Bob Scott, I believe.
Okay.
That was his assistant.
Yeah, Bob Scott. I remember too.
they stayed on out in that plant building
Mhm.
crankshafts, axle parts afterwards.
Well, let's see, we got a pretty good dossier on the jet engine, John. Then, now, jet engine, you said you stayed this kind of until they turned the switch on the jet engine program.
Right.
Then what did you end up
I
having?
went back to the main plant in working in production engineering in the engine parts.
Engine parts.
Right.
Okay,
Prior to then, I'd been in axle parts,
yeah.
but I went back. and
Did
it
you
was,
take somebody else's job or did you just, how did that?
They kind of split it up a little bit, but leave, well,
See, the rocket engine had happened while you were off doing jet engines. So we had put the rocket engine in the new V8.
yeah,
And so you came back as engine parts, which must have been V8 stuff, huh?
yeah. 50, when did the jet engine move out?
That must have been,
52, 53?
well, 53 or 54, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I can just vaguely remember it.
And I came back and took on, trying to think, I think it was kind of an expansion.
Okay,
And Ralph McNitt had part of the engine parts, and I had part of it.
okay.
Matter of fact, there was two. At this time, they was putting in. They put in the so-called new block line.
The 28 block line.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
and that was. I don't know what it was. I think it was just being set up.
Mm-hmm,
Somebody else had ordered the equipment,
okay.
and I had the 28 block line, bearing caps for all blocks, camshafts, piston pins, and connecting. Those were my parts.
Mm-hmm, okay. Now, did you have to, the block line had been ordered, was coming in?
The original block line was, yes.
Okay. Now, were you then, did you have to install that new block line? Or was that before you got there?
I'm not sure. I think it was installed.
Okay.
Really sure that it was. In fact, I think Mark Katke had been involved in that. Because I'm fuzzy on some of this
That's
stuff.
okay.
No,
That's all right.
I can remember one model train thing
Okay.
that we had, they raised increased the stroke of the engine.
All right.
On that 28 block line, we spent over $2 million just in parts and labor just to convert it one cylinder block to the next one. And I can set the two of them on a bench, 10 feet apart, and I defy you to tell the difference. But it costs over $2 million to retool that line so that you could make the new block. Banks were higher and the block was a little wider.
Yeah.
Of course, that meant moving spindles all over the place.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That we got some. I don't know what kind of a honing equipment they have on cylinder bores today, but I know that the NATCO, National Automatic Tool down in Richmond, we had lots of little machinery in there. And they had bought up a little honing outfit down in Detroit, just Cal. And they'd built honing machines for there. And so they would build, you would hone one complete cylinder block. In other words, you had fixtures that would tip up on an angle because you had vertical spindles.
Mm-hmm.
So you had one fixture would raise the block to the right, next one raised to the left, and one head with 8 spindles would come down into the thing and hone it. Well, that was the accepted practice of doing this. After all, every time the machine cycled, you got a
Whole block.
that whole block.
Yeah.
Well, it was always one of our things in honing. Quality of the honing was crucial in an engine. It had everything to do with initial oil consumption and many times the life of the engine.
Right.
And so I worked. This was all in there money. Sure, that I took over. So I decided I didn't like the idea of doing this thing. So I started working with the engineer from ACTO. And I said, if you measure cylinder bores, you'll find that it takes, of course, what these cylinders would do when they're sized out by that automatically collapse, see? So, but you couldn't withdraw the head until the last bore hit. Well, these were coming off of 2 different boring machines. In no way could you bore everyone exactly duplicate. What we really need to do is just split this machine up. And we had a rougher and a finisher. So what we need is a rougher that will rough the right bank, and then I thought that's one with a station between, one that'll rough the left bank, and then a couple of stations, and then the finisher do the same thing. And I had an awful time selling that, but finally sold it. It added up to this. Coming out of different machines, in one time, why the right bank would take a couple extra, 3 or 4 extra strokes. And we finally was able to convince management that we should buy new ones and buy this type of machines. And I think, I don't know, that at that time became the standard of the industry.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah.
Because
There was, yeah.
You're talking about seconds. Okay, so one of them, it takes 3 or 4 seconds extra to get the right block, and the next one takes 3 or 4 to get the left bank, see? Oh, okay, and if they're all bad on one side, well, okay, you're still no worse off. In other words, never are you worse off. And if there's any difference, by then you're always better off, see?
Yeah.
When we had 2 boring machines boring, and then and these hones, why we utilized most of that in quality improvement.
I wonder why they went to a bank of 8, because in earlier years they had done 4 at a time on VA.
Well, they had the first one. Matter of fact, that was what was in building 38. They were on 45-degree angles.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
But the weight, see those spindles and everything was sagging down there.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, back to the spindles.
Well, but you still, with that machine, you still didn't have the advantage of moving on out, because the machine still wouldn't quit until all 8 bores were sized out.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing wrong with that was these machines, these big old heavy spindles, are in there at 45-degree angle, versus in the other machine where they were vertical, see?
Yeah.
And weights didn't get bother the bottom side of the board and that type of thing. See? That's what the first ones were. You hold all 8 cylinders at the same time.
Yeah.
See? But that would have been an improvement on that if you would have only done one side and then moved up and down the other on the angle. Would have been a better machine than it was. See? But that was the. There again, you wouldn't have got the advantage of hopefully that you got takes a couple extra strokes on the right block on one and the left on the next. See, of course.
Were you there at all, John, when they had the old straight 8?
And I was there, but I was in manufacturing.
Okay, you didn't get down to that part of the plant.
Now my little story about the conversion. I was there in production when they went to the V8 engine, and I was. I don't recall now. what my job was at that time, right off the quick. I knew one of the things that I used to set in on training classes and so forth, which I think half the time I was there, I think I was in one every, all those years, one every week or something, someplace, some kind of a meeting. But anyhow, the, uh, the first year of the V8 engine, rocket engine, the AFA cost, you know what that is.
Oh, yes.
Was less on the brand new engine from scratch, went from a straight eight to a V8, was less than it was on this old straight eight that had been building since time began.
Years, yeah.
And just, I don't know why was this. And I learned from one of the fellows on product engineering what really was the answer to that one. That was that this engine, when they developed it, they started building, they're putting what was to be production engines. They started putting them down at Milford, production engines, and they would run 125, 130 mile an hour right off the line. Mm-hmm. And what I always used to say with the big white father, in other words, the General Motors executives in Detroit told Oldsmobile, you're not going to put that car on the market with a fifth wheel speed in excess of 95 mile an hour. So now, okay, what can we do to slow it down? So the first thing that they tried was change the axle ratio. Well, okay, so they put the lower axle ratio. So she wouldn't do that. Well, what they came up with was a car that you put grandma in the thing out on a dry street without a grain of sand on it, and she couldn't take off hardly without spinning her rear wheels. Well, of course, you know what the kids would do with that.
Oh boy, yes.
So, and even grandma. So then they went back and they choked up the intake manifold, just reduced the openings. So you just couldn't poke enough air through there.
Yeah, wouldn't breathe.
Just cut down on the breathing on the thing. Well, okay, when you develop an engine that will run and stand up at 125, 30 mile an hour, and you cut that thing back to in the 90s, it run about 3/4 speed. Well, as far as the wear and tear and the efforts of the engine, it's never doing anything but just dog trotting around.
Yeah.
When you got the thing to the floor and going down the road at 90 mile an hour, well, the engine itself, from what it was designed at, is just trotting along.
Yeah.
And that was the story as I got it from the engineers, and it's the only story I ever heard that made any sense about it.
Uh-huh.
But the figure you just couldn't believe that the difference in AFA costs at the time. I remember what the figures were quoted, and it just was unbelievable that you would come up with something brand new. After all, somebody's supposed to go.
Well, and usually it's very high cost on that.
Right.
On a new engine. So.
Right. And of course, you got likewise. You had computers was coming in at that time too. A lot of spots. I remember one of the deals, one of the parts I was connected with that. Most of the time I was involved in the engine plant was camshaft.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the, of course, our product engineering, they dealt with a little cam company down in Detroit on making their model camshafts. Ionic, I believe, was the name of it. Well, they also would make master camshafts for grinders and so forth as part of their business.
Sure.
So we worked with them. Well, anytime that product engineering designed a camshaft, then they would have Ionic make them their master shafts for trial. Well, then when they got through, when the product engineering wanted to go, well, then they already had the models all made down there. So within hours almost, we could have a machine to put in the grinder. And I can remember one time he was what was our chief of the quality control, moved up. think he became.
Yeah, I think Gage Martin.
No,
Charlie Armitage?
no,
Anyway.
tall, slim fellow.
Oh, Cole.
Yeah,
Elmer
Elmer Cole.
Yeah.
He came to us from Chevrolet, didn't he?
I don't know.
I think he did.
Yeah, may have.
And I know engineering, they was monkeying with a camshaft. This was Wolfram. Cole at that time was chief engineer, I think.
Okay.
And Wolfram had told sales department, put in their advertising, we was going to have a new camshaft in the car because they didn't have any changes, not much to talk about, see. So it came down to the point within less than 2 weeks, the day the engine line was going to start, by engineering, of course, the advertising was all out, and our sales department was already talking about this new camshaft that they had. Well, here's 2 weeks now, the line's going to start, probably engineering had to pull the one back that they had and said, look, it's not as good. We can't live with the performance we're getting out of it. We're sorry. So they had to do something so that they weren't a bunch of fabricators. So they rotated the cams 1 degree, went up intake, went up a degree advanced, and the other one, I don't know which one was which, but the other one, 1 degree retard. Now, okay, it's a brand new drawing, it's a different camshaft. Sure. Anybody look at it can see there's difference. You couldn't tell any difference in the performance of the engines of the old one. Well, that they didn't care about, see. But they still were able to say, well, we got a new camshaft. Well, of course, the camshaft engineer was always, we would work together like you do with your wife with breakfast and supper, see. Mm-hmm. So he called up and said, look, he said, we got to pull this old camshaft, and we got a new design. And he told me what they'd done to it. And he said, can you make some shafts? Can we be ready to go on time? I said, I don't know, but I don't think there'll be any problem because I knew what the score was down in the Onyx. Mm-hmm. So 2 weeks while we had masters in here for our grinders, enough to build all the camshafts we needed. We just kept on adding them in, came over. Well, after the smoke cleared away, Elmo Cole came over to my office one day. I didn't know him too well at the time, but he came over and came and sat down. He said, I'm going to know just what the hell, for sure. I'm sure he came from Chevrolet. Yeah. And I was over there because of their volume. Well, then when he started talking about master camshafts, well, he was talking about 3 or 4 times what we were, and that could make a problem anyway, see. And he said, how the hell can you guys have masters in here on that kind of notice? So I went through and explained to him just what the score was. And I also told him, I said, we don't always go by the book and wait for somebody to give us a formal order. We've got working relationships with these people, and if somebody tries to pull a rug off under them, why then we still don't have to start hollering uncle that we can do it. And that's we've done a lot of this ever since I've been in the department. So he was real happy when he left there. But I'm sure that there was less than 2 weeks from the day that they had to back off from the camshaft. We already had masters being made while they reground them, of course. Sure. But within, I think by the next day they had one in there for us. Of course, Detroit only 90 miles away. Right. Drive down and get it. Drive down and get it. And they'd bring it up to you, one way or the other, see. So I think we're within 2 days after they made the change, but we had one master in there and was able to produce a shaft. And by the time production, well, we had enough machines running that we could build all the camshafts that they needed. So. Sure. See, John, you stayed then working in the engine end of the business then until you retired. Right. When did you retire? My last day on the payroll was May 31st of 1972. 1972. Okay. So you must have
There was some work on aluminum engines.
Yes, we did a lot of work on aluminum engines, and I was glad what I knew about it that we never did go to aluminum blocks as far as Oldsmobile weldings. So
Right.
there was problems that I wasn't quite sure that you could have the controls that I like to see going into Oldsmobiles. Coefficient of expansion of aluminum is just about twice what it is for cast iron. So
Did it ever get close? Aluminum blocks?
yeah, it was close. Matter of fact, one of the things they was going to do was to put they were going to put pressing cast iron sleeves
Into the cylinders.
into the cylinder. Did a lot of work on figuring out just how you was going to how that was going to be accomplished. In fact, that was going to be one of our jobs to do. It got close.
Did you ever work on the little F-85 engine?
Uh,
The head side that we did do machining on, or was that someone else?
now, between McNett and then later on, he went into the action plan, I believe, and I was an old Englishman,
Oh, Leonard
Sear.
Sear.
Leonard Sear. He did we worked on the heads.
Okay.
I remember when they was going into unleaded gas or unleaded gas.
Yeah.
That we did a job. My group did a job on making inserts to put in those.
And the valve inserts?
Right.
Uh-huh.
I don't think we came up with some costs and so forth on it. Me and my engineers, and at that time we didn't go into it. I don't know if they ever eventually went into making their own inserts or not.
I don't think so.
But I can remember some of the comments that came out of the product engineering on that thing. And what the basic purpose of lead in there was to lubricate valve seats.
Mhm.
And I remember Maury Graham, I believe, was one of the engineers, liaison engineers, said that if you took an engine, a brand new engine, and started running that thing really like you would on a block, 10,000 miles, those valves would wear themselves practically all the way through the head.
Oh my goodness, so that was the lead.
Right, without the lead. Said if you put in 1 tank and 4 of leaded fuel, and there would be enough residual lubrication in there that it would work all right.
Oh.
But if you had to have some lead in it. Later on, eventually they come up with substitute lubrications, I guess.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Hardened seats. Yeah, they experimented with hardening seats, and I don't think that ever materialized. I'm not sure.
See, John, did the third block line, did that come along while
Yeah.
you were there? Yeah. Okay. Any peculiar experiences you remember with that?
I think that came in kind of late, and I believe that I believe Leonard
And family thing?
here, I think, handled that.
Okay.
In fact, that was further
Yeah,
further east,
right.
And
Next building over.
yeah, in fact, had been a parking lot that they put in.
Built the building in the parking lot.
In fact, I think that was the first broach that they brought in that was on that line for broaching bank faces on cylinder blocks.
Oh, okay. Could be.
Yeah,
Could be. It may have been Miller.
I don't think they ever did the broach bank faces on the other two lines, 38 and 28. Or 36 was it? 36.
Well, 36, 38, it kind of slobbered over there. So,
Yeah, I think we eventually took leave the retaining wall between them, didn't we?
yeah, it was all gone. Yeah.
he had re-signed it, left one building into the other eventually.
See, anything in the fifties or the sixties that you think maybe was kind of significant?
They always did things around there that amazed me. I remember one time when it was on this, building these machine guns, upstairs. They put in, in fact, that's where our boat department was. That's where they made the 20 millimeter. No,
Okay.
that's where they built the 37.
Oh, it was on the second
It
floor?
was on the second
Oh, that
floor.
must have been in building 38 then.
Yeah, 38.
Uh-huh.
And in order, much of this machinery was large, so they just went down to the end of the building and knocked a great big old hole into the building, brought the machines up there, and they got them up there. Well, then they bricked it back up, put the windows back in. And
Oh my goodness.
that was that
Okay.
they were, and I think they had to take them out this probably in the same way.
Uh-huh.
In fact, some of them, I think they did it too. There used to be a siding down between. I think some of them they brought in between. Well, that eventually became a building over there. I think some of them, when they took them out, they had to take them out on the end of the building, the north end.
Uh-huh. Okay. How about unique, what you would consider unique processes that were perhaps created?
Well, we had a lot of. We did things on the connecting rods that were unique at the time and added to quality. In a lot of cases, I was responsible for many of them.
Uh-huh.
And I was still applying this old philosophy of if I can't see how that you can fix a problem that develops, well, then I'm not going to go that way. And
Yeah.
we'd look for some way that you had alternates. And always wanted an alternate, a hole to crawl out of. In other words, if you got into trouble.
Mhm.
And if you was to go back and look at most of the stuff, the lines that I was connected with, you'd find that any operation of any consequence on there, that usually there was holes that if you got in trouble, that you could get out of.
Sure.
You could change your course, straighten them out. I think that was kind of a philosophy that I used all the way through the program, all my years there.
See, now Pete Mitchell became, I guess, the department head eventually.
Yeah.
Who preceded him? Remember?
Well, I think Jerry Joint was in there. Frank Hager was in there, and it'd take me a while to straighten out just to see.
Was Bob Russell in there?
Yeah. Matter of fact, Bob Russell may have been the guy that preceded Pete.
Pete, okay.
Because he went into General Supervisor on the jet engine program. He was the night superintendent of the axle plant for a short time.
Bob Russell?
No, Pete Mitchell.
Pete Mitchell was. Oh, okay.
Prior to the jet engine program.
All right. Uh-huh.
And as I understood it, when he was approached about taking on the production engineering obligations for the jet engine. See, the tool room came under him too over there.
Yes.
Yeah, Miles South Salisbury was superintendent of
Okay.
the tool room in the jet plant.
Yeah.
So Pete has, I was told, not by Pete, but by other people, that part of his stipulation if he took the job was there was certain people that were going to come with him.
Uh-huh.
And Lyle and I were two of those.
Okay. What kind of a guy was Bob Russell?
I was like Bob.
You must have worked kind of for him.
Oh yes, yeah. He was using my boss's boss for many years. And Bob was a good boss. I think he was typical of many of them. That he didn't have all the answers himself. he kind of had the ability to know whether you had them or not.
Uh-huh.
And if you had them, then he was able to decide whether or not that you could and was doing the job.
Yeah.
And after all, there's nobody can do it all. And that's one of the important characteristics of being a good supervisor or leader is being able to pick people to do the job.
Who do you think was your best boss, John? That you had?
Uh, I'd have to say that I worked for him the longest. I'd probably have to say that Mitchell probably was.
Pete?
That's some other bosses that pretty good.
Why did you like Pete?
I don't know. Other than probably, I knew as much about most of the job as he did, and I never got if I wanted to do things. Why, usually didn't have too much problem convincing him that we were on the right track. Oh,
How about engineers that you had working for you? Who would have been your best engineer over the years?
boy. Ray Burns did a top job. He moved on up.
He went over to Detroit Diesel.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike.
And I used to like to salvage Ed Butler.
Okay.
It's had kind of a peculiar personality. And not too long after I came back to jet engines, that Ed was off on leave of absence. And he was supposedly not feeling too well. I heard afterwards what he was really without. He was out looking for a job to go move someplace.
Oh.
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but he worked in tool design. I knew it from tool design. To me, he was a good engineer.
Yeah.
So I kind of persuaded Ed to stay. He had some peculiarities, but I knew pretty well what they were. Kind of had to cater to him a little bit.
Sure.
He was an excellent engineer. And I'd say one of the biggest problems I ever had with Ed was well, if he decided he needed to do something downtown, first thing you know, he'd be doing it.
He was gone.
And I'd get the info, come around off into the side window someplace, eh? And more than once I got onto his back about that. With a kid. I said, I can send you any place in town. I said, if you need to do something someplace, well, I can send you down there to do it. But I said, anytime that you're leaving the plant, I want to know about it. That still was one of the problems that I always had with him.
Well, that's what makes the job interesting. Everybody's different.
You call on people for extra effort always, especially in a job like that. So everybody talking. Okay, when you're getting the extra effort out of people, it's always kind of handy once in a while to be able to do a little something for them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember part of my education was that one time, John Coleman.
Okay.
Did you know John?
No, I did not.
Knew of him anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, anyhow, the engineers, which they were many times, were on long hours and difficult to do personal things.
Yeah.
One of the engineers went over to a barber shop on South Washington Avenue over there. And when he walks into the place, why, John Coleman was sitting in a chair, his haircut, see. But the engineer was a job where he got paid for his overtime. John, he was that time I think he was calling me master mechanic.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he walked in, he see John, he goes, "Hi, John." Coleman never acknowledged anything. So he thought, well, maybe he didn't hear him. So he said again, he said, "Hi, John." John continued to ignore him, say, well, John was already chair, so he gets back to the plant ahead of the engineer, say, when the engineer got back, why his boss was waiting. Uh-oh. Said the next thing you're out like that and you bump into John Coleman, why you just don't see him. He can always tell his boss that he didn't see you,
Right.
even though you might have stepped on his toes.
Oh,
It was a good lesson. It kind of passed around.
well, John, we spent a long time talking. I think probably don't want to over talk you, so.
Well, I hope that there's something in there that.
Oh, a lot of interesting things. The jet engine stuff is interesting. That's all very interesting stuff that we don't know about. So
In order to put all this stuff in the proper category, I would need to look at after all. This started 1933,
Oh,
December.
yeah.
That's to be 55 years.
That's right. Long time
A couple
ago.
of months. Next month, actually.
Yeah, it's a long time. Well, I think if you don't object, I'm going to shut off the tape recorder and
Shut it off.
we'll quit here.